Did you know that Lincoln is home to over 30,000 refugees and immigrants from approximately 150 different countries? Nebraska has a long history of resettling refugees. In fact, one year, Nebraska resettled more refugees per capita than any other state in the U.S. Well, tonight we're going to take a closer look at how CSS has helped refugees find that hope in the good life. Joining us is CSS Executive Director Katie Patrick. Wave, Patty, so they know you now. She was just last year named the Young Nonprofit Professional of the Year in Lincoln. What an honor. You earlier met Father Justin Fulton, former Executive Director of CSS and now the Vicar General of the Diocese of Lincoln. And with me to my immediate left is Faheem Rashidi, an Afghanistan refugee who came to the U.S. in 2000 with his family. And to his left is Oleg Stepanyuk, also a refugee, but from Ukraine, who came here with his family in 1996. Both men and their families were resettled in Lincoln by Catholic Social Services. Let's give them a round of applause. Now, before we go any further, I'd like for Faheem and Oleg to give us a quick minute about and tell us a little bit more about why you left your home country and how you're living the American dream today. Faheem, why don't you start?
All right.
You're on.
Thanks, John. I don't know if I told you, John, that or not, but I get really nervous when I'm on the stage. It's a professional announcer. All right, so my name is Faheem Rashidi, and I was born in Afghanistan. At age 8, my father passed away, and it was during the time of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and we were forced to go to Pakistan and live in refugee camps. That was until I turned 16, and one day my older sister told me that we were going to America. Like, America? The only thing I knew about America were Hollywood movies, nothing else. So at that point, I had no idea where I'm going, where I'm headed, how life would look like. But of course, I had at age 16, you have these thoughts of, well, I'm going to America. Hopefully, it will be wonderful. After many hours of flight, ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska. For the first time, our flight was delayed, and there were wonderful people from Catholic Social Services. And there was a family of Tim Pieper and Kate Pieper. I know he said he could make it, but I know Kate is out of, oh, there he is. Tim, I always wanted to do that. Can you stand up for a minute, please? Stand up. From that 20 years ago, Tim and Catholic Social Services have been pretty much a guide to me. In the first few weeks, we had many classes from Catholic Social Services taking us around the city and town. And one day, they took us to the Capitol building. And when the caseworker was telling us that this is where the governor is, I was like, that's not possible. This never happens. I never heard of that you can go to the a place where the governor's office is. But that gave me some hope that, you know, if you can visit a governor's office, me as a refugee, there are a lot of opportunities for me to move forward and kind of build a life from there. But I could have not done it. I lived in the basement of a church. Kate Pieper, Tim, used to bring food and support us, and I still actually, we're neighbors now. I still ask him about any decision that we make.
Is he still bringing you food?
Yes, he does, actually. Coffee, I get a lot of coffee. But at the end, I'm one of the 34 million Afghans. And for me to be sitting here and talking to you all It just didn't happen. It happened because we had wonderful people supporting us. We had great caseworkers, and I mean, Father Fulton is always, we have a chat when we see each other, Katie. But Catholic Social Services has not only provided me the opportunity, but thousands of other refugees, especially last year with the what happened in Afghanistan. So I'm sitting here is because of all the support and love that we received from you guys, from each and every one of you.
And today, Faheem owns Lincoln Pharmacy and just bought A Street Grocery right next door.
That's correct.
Living the American dream. Oleg, tell us your story, if you would.
Well, my name is Oleg Stepanyuk, and I'm Ukrainian. I belong to that first wave of immigration that started in 1988 when United States of America started receiving refugees that were persecuted because of their faith. So it was so-called Lautenberg Amendment that was passed in Congress, and our family was one of such families. So back at Soviet time, not only Afghans were persecuted or the war in Afghanistan, but there was religious persecution in Soviet Union, and mostly Protestant, Catholics, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So those people were put in prison. They couldn't freely practice their faith. And finally, they were given the opportunity to immigrate, to move to the United States if they want to. So in 1989, my grandma moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, believe it or not. And she was one of the pioneers of Ukrainians nationals that landed here in our wonderful city. And then 7 years later, in 1996, I, my wife, and my brother, we came. I was 22-year-old then. And sure enough, just like Faheem was sharing, people from Catholic Social Services had met us at the airport, received us, provided some guidance. It was so wonderful because we never met that type of treatment before, honestly. So I still remember this short young lady with a big old smile that, that was a smile that was telling more than thousands of words. And we were really thankful for that. So from there, we were blessed because from people that, it's a very good thing to receive help if you're in need. But what's even better is to be able to provide help. So God was gracious to us, and we transferred from the position where we needed help to the position when we ourselves are able to provide help, especially to the nation, to our nation at war right now, our own people.
And also, living the American dream, you own Advantage Trucking here in Lincoln.
I do.
Very good. Katie, both men here are refugees, but we also help to resettle, or not resettle, but we help immigrants to this town as well. What is the difference between a refugee and an immigrant?
Sure. So I think it's pretty easy to get a little confused with all of the terms that are out there with immigration today. So as you just heard the stories from Faheem and Oleg, they came here as refugees. And so a refugee is someone who is forced to leave their home country. And so there's either violence or the fear of persecution or personal suffering that they have experienced. And so they have really no other choice but to run and to go to a neighboring country and then go through the process of becoming a refugee and then resettling into a new country. When we hear the term immigrant, that means that that individual has chosen to leave their home country and to make their home in a new country. And so they oftentimes will leave for economic, employment, school, different opportunities like that. And then we hear the term migrant, and that refers to individuals who, like immigrants, will also leave their home country, but they have the intention of going back one day. And so they'll leave for a short time, do some work, and then return home. And I think in Nebraska we do see this. Seasonal migrants, and so they're oftentimes you find in agriculture work. And then another term is humanitarian parolee, and this has nothing to do with the U.S. justice system, so don't let that term parolee confuse you there. But humanitarian parolees are individuals who in many cases have been invited or allowed into the United States, but temporarily. And so they are here legally, they can work, they can live, they can go to school, but their status is temporary. And so it can be a little bit confusing and uncertain for those individuals and for the agencies and the institutions that help them because of that temporary status. And so all of the Afghan, or I shouldn't say all, but many of the Afghan individuals and the Ukrainians as well that have come over the past couple of years came to the United States under that humanitarian parolee status. And I think we'll probably get more into that, and I'll let Faheem and Oleg talk about some of those obstacles and the challenges that the parolee status has.
Wonderful, thank you. Father Fulton, why would the church, the Catholic Social Services, get involved with refugee resettlement?
That's a very good question. I always try to frame any answer that I might give in regard to social teaching through a spiritual lens. As Catholics, everything we do in the physical is derivative of a spiritual reality, that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. And the fact is that Jesus died, rose, and he ascended into heaven. And Jesus started one church, our church. And we know that through the waters of baptism that we are attached to the body of Jesus Christ, that we are Jesus Christ in the world. Jesus did his suffering on Calvary, and when we have suffering, we can offer that to him for the salvation of all. Jesus couldn't do all the teaching, yet he started a church so that we could teach people. Jesus couldn't do all the loving, yet he started a church, and we're all members of it to love our neighbor. That's the fact, that we are Jesus in this world. I think John Chrysostom says something to the effect that you won't be able to see Jesus in the chalice if you can't see Jesus in the poor. And that's exactly where the Catholic Church fills in. That's why we get involved, helping the migrant, helping the immigrant, helping the refugee. That's why we get involved giving counseling sessions to people, giving people food. We don't just do it like a governmental agency. We do it because we believe that we are Jesus Christ in this world. And then when we see our brothers, if they're created in the image and likeness of God, which every human person is, we're actually seeing God in every person that we encounter. That every person in here is a living tabernacle that has God's image in them. And so we service God, we honor God, and we love God by loving our neighbor. It's an honor to be Catholic, and it's also a huge responsibility to be Catholic. That's why we get involved in matters like these, and we always will.
Very good. Speaking of faith, and before I forget, this great story about Faheem, you know, the Catholic Social Services headquarters used to be the Old Country Buffet. And he went out to dinner with Tim Pieper, I guess, and noticed this waitress had a similar accent to his, to Faheem's. You got to know her, and, well, how many kids do you have now?
We can blame Tim for that. Yes, so I went with Tim to Old Country Buffet, and I saw this wonderful, beautiful woman sitting here, my wife. She's we've been married for 14 years, and we have 4 kids.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's great. And going back kind of to the faith question, Faheem, you're Muslim. Oleg, you were Protestant. Did it matter to you at all at the time that the Catholic Church via Catholic Social Services was there to help you? Let's start with you, Oleg.
No, I'm very encouraged actually that there are a lot of people of goodwill around us. And I believe that even thinking of what's happening in Ukraine right now, people from different faith backgrounds, people from different nations, they all come together as brothers. So how I look at it, you know, I may be in need today, and Jesus is using Father Fulton to help me. Maybe tomorrow I will be in the position to help him. And I really enjoy what he said. All of us are made in the image of the Lord, and this is You know, somebody asked me, what's the best translation of the Bible? Do you know what's the best translation of the Bible? It's our life. It's our attitude. It's what we do for others. So I'm thankful for Catholic Social Services and the help that we receive.
Faheem, how about that question?
I think one of the beauty and the reason for our success and was that nobody ever asked me what religion you are. For some of my friends, and some of you here probably know that you will never see me on the passenger side in a car because I get motion sickness. I always have to drive, but when I was in school and college, I couldn't take a bus. Otherwise, I would have been sleeping or be very sick in the class, so I used to walk. And either from school or back to college, I would stop by Catholic Social Services, get a lunchbox. I mean, like, at least I have this. But nobody ever asked me what religion you are. Where are you from? The goal was always to provide me the support, what I needed to be successful. And I like to take this opportunity to mention all the influencer and the politicians that the worst thing for a teenager, I mean, at age 16, 17, especially come from a place like Afghanistan, not only for a refugee, for any teenager, is to tell them or discourage them with something like race, gender, color. That would be the worst thing. If I was, I mean, there are people that will put you down, but most of the time, 99% of the time, my goal was always on the side of, this is Catholic Social Services. It's in the title, but I was never asked anything about my religion. The only thing that was focused was, the help that was provided to me. And I think that really encouraged me, and the reason I'm sitting here today is that I was never discriminated and never asked what your religion is.
Wonderful. Father Fulton, you want to comment on that? Why does faith not matter?
You'll never be sent to hell for helping somebody out. Simple as that. I can't think of, I'm not a biblical scholar. You don't want to see my grades in seminary, but you can't show me one line in the Bible, or if you help somebody out, regardless of who they are or where they're from, actually you can find many examples of Jesus going out to the Jews and the Gentiles. And frankly, that's the whole book of Acts. Luke and Acts is one, maybe I will get biblical. Luke and Acts is one book, basically, and the whole point of it is that Jesus dies, rises, starts a church, and when the church gets to Rome, the church has now gotten to the whole universe. And the church is for everybody, and the church helps everybody. I think we used to say when I was at CSS that we don't just serve Catholics, we help everybody because we are Catholic. And it's something that we're proud of and we will always represent at CSS. Wonderful.
Katie, people resettling people from Afghanistan, Ukraine, of course, that's in the headlines. But CSS is not only helping people from those countries. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So over the past couple of years, certainly most of the humanitarian parolees and refugees that we have welcomed have been from those countries, but we are also very privileged to welcome the Karen community, and they are an ethnic group that is originally from Myanmar. It was formerly Burma, so sometimes you'll hear Myanmar or Burma, but the Karen community has made Lincoln their home for decades now, and so we continue to receive individuals from that community. And then also this past year, we've had a number of families come from Syria, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then also from Iraq. And that's just a few. So we're blessed really at CSS to welcome people from all over the world. In our immigration program, we work with individuals from Central and South America as well. And then I think coming up to this year, we're scheduled to receive, again, roughly 150 individuals. And so who knows kind of where they're going to be coming from. But one thing I do want to comment too is that today there are more than 100 million refugees and internally displaced persons in our world. That's a 35% increase in just 5 years. And so there are so many people who tonight, as most of us will be able to leave this dinner and go home, there's 100 million people who won't be able to do that. And so it's just very important that CSS remains a place in our country where we can continue to resettle and welcome refugees from around the world.
Faheem, in your experience, what's the biggest obstacle refugees face when resettling into a new country?
It's a completely different world. Social, cultural shock is probably the biggest obstacle. Language, you go to a new place, you don't know how to speak the language, you don't know how to ask for help, you don't know anything. You don't know how to call a doctor, how to call for emergency services. But most of the refugees, if they did not have the help that they have today, it would have been pretty much impossible for any one of us to be sitting or any of these families to say, Lincoln is our home. But I always mention this whenever I talk or sit with friends, is that you're a child born, but you're not really a child, you're an adult, because you don't have the power to talk to people, you don't have the power to communicate. You want to, but you don't have that ability. So the help and services that we received is just beyond, what we would have asked for.
Oh, if I could just comment on that too. When you first started talking this evening, you called out Tim and Kate. And I think that that's so important because you came here 23 years ago. And that relationship that you first, you encountering him for the first time 23 years ago, he is still your friend today. And I think it's just so important for refugees and it's really important for all of you to know that when you extend yourself and when you encounter refugees and when you build those relationships, when you volunteer with CSS, you are going to change a person's life.
Absolutely. Tim, we always talk, I talk to Tim, we still sit and I still use him and he still gives me some discount when I go get a car from him. So, but no, that relation continued, that respect, and it was always, I considered him, I don't call him a father because he's not that old, but he's an older brother for me, so yeah.
Would you introduce me to Tim? I'd like to get a new car.
Absolutely.
I know Tim. Oleg, tell us about one of the biggest obstacles you faced being a refugee from Ukraine.
Well, being a refugee or even an immigrant for that part is like, uprooting a tree and trying to plant it again. And the older you are, the more difficult it is. So in my case, I'm just going to tell you one funny story. When we were leaving Ukraine back in the day, right now Ukraine is pro-Western nation, and it's very similar to what we have here. So they have through much less stress adjusting to the way of living here in the United States. I'm talking a new wave of immigrants. But in my days, I got an advice, so if you don't know what to say, just say yes. So, we met with Catholic Social Services case manager. We got established at ESL class. And then it was probably second week of our being here in the United States, we got one part of the duplex, and me and my wife, we were just kind of painting the walls or doing something to make it a little more presentable. It was an old, really old duplex. And then somebody knocked on the door. And, I opened the door and, they started speaking. And, I was just waiting for that pause to put my yes in there. And sure enough, they paused. I said, yes. Okay, they kept talking. And then at the end of the conversation, they wrote me a check. Like, my goodness, what a good country. They found me. They brought the check to me. I'm like, wow, that's wonderful. So we were so happy, went to bed. Next day, the same people came again, so I don't even listen to what they say, I just say yes. So after we, talked briefly, they start unloading furniture. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. They brought new furniture now. It can't get any better. And then they brought furniture in, and they are not leaving. And we came to the point that we had to call for help. And the help came and said, Oleg, you just rented your own house to these people. You took deposit for that house yesterday. Where are you going to live now? Oh my goodness. So that was our experience. Our experience. And then I really, from that day forward, I really did not use that advice again, right? Anyway, but on a serious note, of course, you basically start a new life, just like Faheem was saying. You're limited to what you can do. You're limited in your communication. You're limited in your education because, you know, for example, for me, I had a bachelor's degree in economics back from Ukraine. When I came, I went to Southeast Community College to take Microsoft Word or whatever it was. That's from the, you know, very bottom level, you know, trying to grow up and taking care of children, and you do what you can. And the help of the community, I think Faheem was a really lucky man to have an older brother like Tim. But just to encourage you that what comes a long way is that partner, that brotherhood, that partnership where you can take somebody under your wing and just check on him periodically. Just have that kind of, accountability. Hey, how you're doing? You know, are you doing okay? A lot of people, other refugees that are coming with, especially new wave of immigration. They come with a lot of trauma because a lot of them are single mothers with children while their fathers are fighting at war and they don't know if they are alive, what's going on with them. A lot of them, their homes are gone and their loved ones are killed. So that's that's what happens at war. And these people, besides just the material support, they need a lot of prayer, a lot of spiritual support, if you will, a lot of love. You know, they need their inner wounds to be. I shouldn't touch the microphone. Inner wounds to be healed, and that's when people like you will be of huge help. It's priceless, honestly.
Oleg, you shared something quite funny about being a refugee. How about you, Faheem? Anything strange or unusual that you came across?
Everything, like I said, is probably once you come to a new country. Ukraine is a little bit closer to Western cultures, but Afghanistan is completely different. So if you see an Afghan person behaving completely different, it's not because they want to be like, it's just because they don't know. Like when I was going to school, I didn't know. I just didn't know how to dress. I didn't know what kind of backpack I should take. I just didn't know what to expect from my classmates. Besides going to Old Country Buffets. But yeah, pretty much for me, every step that I took was just a new lesson.
Mm-hmm. A new life. Yeah. Father Fulton, what sort of strange or funny things can you relate to us as the Vicar General of the Diocese of Lincoln?
Oh my God. I'll tell you, come to my office for 2 hours, any of you guys, and you'll see a side of the church that you'll never, no, it's no, it's actually, it's quite an honor. I tell folks, I'm not in a parish anymore, and I think that's because the role of the Vicar General, it takes a lot of time. And frankly, you run into some conflicts of interest too, so it wouldn't be good that if you were in a parish, you might actually have to make decisions that might not be good for that parish. So in essence, I'm taken away from it. But I do think of when I'm sitting at the computer or going to another meeting or at the end of the day saying my prayers, I think of the folks that we served at CSS. And I think of the folks that when I was at St. Teresa's as a parochial vicar there, the 4 years I taught at Pius and the 2 years that I was at Cathedral. I think of the Knights of Columbus, who I serve now as state chaplain. Even though I'm not in a parish, the parish is all the people of God for 24,000 square miles of southern Nebraska. So in essence, it's an opportunity to serve that not a lot of people have an opportunity to get to serve, and in that, it's very much an honor to be a pastor to everybody.
Wonderful. That wasn't one of the questions on my script, so sorry to throw that at you. Katie, what are some ways we as average citizens can be more active and welcoming to our newest Nebraskans?
I think something that we can all do and start immediately is to pray. And pray for not just the refugees who are here with us now in Nebraska, but pray for their families abroad, because it was alluded to by both Faheem and Oleg, but the refugees and the families who are here, they're still struggling inside because they left behind other family members and friends and neighbors and parishes, and that can be very painful, and it can affect their ability to integrate and be successful here in the U.S. So pray for those who are here, and pray for their family members and their friends and their parishes back home. The next thing would be to donate. If we are always in need of beds and couches and tables and chairs and house goods, to prepare the apartments for the families that we are welcoming. And so if you have those items that you want to donate, that would be awesome. When the Afghan community first started coming a couple years ago, I will tell you that your generosity was impressive. And I'm grateful for that. We all are. You filled the offices at CSS so well that we had a hard time moving around and working. So you guys are doing great with that, and I thank you. And then the last thing would be to volunteer. And as we heard tonight, and as you know from personal experience, relationships are really what help people thrive. And so if someone is new, if someone is going through a difficult time, just having that friend or having that neighbor check in on you is invaluable. And so whether you can volunteer for 1 hour a month or 10 or hundreds of hours like our dear knights here, volunteer. And you can check our website for that application, everything like that. So those would be the things I'd say.
Wonderful. Faheem and Oleg, anything else you'd like to add tonight?
Well, just a thankfulness for all of you, for Catholic social services, for Catholic community in our city, for everyone who was part of those 3 items that Katie mentioned, either donate nor praying or volunteering on behalf of people in need. We just want to say thank you from our communities, from the people that benefited from your kindness.
Same thing from me. I just want to thank everybody that helped me. Didn't have to be financial help or didn't have to be anything. Just the smile, the support, the love that we received in this wonderful state community. That's everything we could ask for, and our hope is that it will continue for the newly arrival refugees that are either from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, or from any part of the world.
Wonderful. How about a round of applause for our panel here tonight?